Stay up to date with everything iconic by following us on all of our social media. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like our videos. Due to monetization restrictions, you can support us by going to patreon.com/theiconicpodcast and make a monthly pledge. We are happy to announce the launch of the Iconic Label, where you can go to theiconiclabel.com and purchase an ever-expanding line of merchandise and gear. And now, without further ado, enjoy part 2 of Communist Subversion.
Authoritarianism is not, alas, the stuff of dystopian fantasy, but of an emerging reality.
Their policy depends on deception and secrecy.
Power, money, and control.
Surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step.
War is for profit. It's for the profit of the top 10%.
We're either being paid or being played.
You do not need to wear a medical mask.
It is corrupt, it is corrupting, it is corrosive to our national defense.
And suppress your population.
The media didn't know, and it would take us years to find out.
The piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself.
CFR membership as the ruling establishment in the United States.
They're planning on millions of acres taken by eminent domain. Our national sovereignty is under threat.
I've been in the news business for about 2 decades. I'd never heard of it. That's because the organizers don't really want you to know about it.
Most blatant abuse.
I mean, of course there were insider deals. Of course it was payback.
Isn't this all about political control, politics, and big business? The whole thing's a sham.
Stop buying masks. They don't work.
They had the motive. They had the monetary gain.
The whole thing is a fake.
Crime against the peace.
These guys should be brought up and charged.
Biggest tort case ever. The Corona fraud scandal.
They didn't isolate as a virus.
Viruses have never been isolated.
Guys like Fauci get up there and start talking, he doesn't know anything really about anything, and I'd say that to his face.
Like, there's no reason to be walking around with a mask.
Viewing the history of the world as a history of warfare between secret societies that well-established upper-class families with old money who founded and financed the Bilderberg Group, Bohemian Grove, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, the Rhodes Trust, Skull and Bones, Trilateral Commission, and similar think tanks and private clubs are illuminated conspirators plotting to impose a totalitarian New World Order, the implementation of an authoritarian world government controlled by the United Nations, and a global central bank which maintains political power through the financialization of the economy, regulation and restriction of speech through the concentration of media ownership, mass surveillance, widespread use of state terrorism, and an all-encompassing propaganda that creates a cult of personality around a puppet world leader and ideologizes world government as the culmination of history's progress. That was Michael Birkin in his book, A Culture of Conspiracy, Apocalyptic Visions in Contemporary America. He gives a critique of the New World Order concept, and he goes on to say that in this view, the New World Order is being implemented gradually, citing the formulation of the U.S. Federal Reserve System in 1913, the League of Nations in 1919, the International Monetary Fund in 1944, the United Nations and the World Bank in 1945, the World Health Organization in 1948, the European Union and the Euro currency in 1993, the World Trade Organization in 1998, the African Union in 2002, and the Union of the South American Nations in 2008. All major milestones, though he doesn't include the International Telecommunications Union in 1865, the International Telegraph Union in 1874, the Postal Union also in 1874, and the International Peace Conference in 1899. We mentioned Barkin's summary to give the viewer a destination, a heads up to where they are going. Socialism is the vehicle, or the how they intend to get us there. In Communist Subversion Part 1, a plan for total worldwide control, we've echoed Barkin's summary. We mentioned there's a war with an unseen enemy who lives in the shadows but operates in plain sight. We said that their symbols are everywhere. The symbols reveal who they actually are. They communicate out in the open. They telegraph everything that they're going to do. They have a monopoly on public opinion. And what they are implementing is nothing less than worldwide communism in the name of social justice in a two-phase revolution, one violent and one nonviolent. The nonviolent Fabian form of the revolution presents the most dangerous threat, as it calls for the gradual, systematic transition of government power by stealth and secrecy through peace and politics by the 4 stages of ideological subversion: demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization, using pincer military tactics, pinching the majority through politicians and protesters to implement socialism, gaining government control and ownership over all private property, the means of production, and all avenues of trade, thus providing the Cecil Rhodes and Milner Roundtable groups, their sub-organizations, and various more powerful NGOs, and their brainchild, the United Nations, eventual total world control through the emergent global government, first under the guise of global cooperation, then global governance through the World Federation of Nations, culminating in a single world government, which is why now they're using socialism to centralize private property into the hands of the state and out of the hands of its citizens. John Welch of the John Birch Society gives us a 10-step strategy in addition to Bezmenov's ideological subversion and Griffith's pincer military tactics to remove American sovereignty piece by piece and step by step.
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Now, here are the aims for the United States. 1, greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible.
We see this clearly in major events that require the United States government to borrow money in large sums. And one of the best examples of it is the war on terror and the Cost Plus program in Iraq.
It was a promise the Bush administration was not able to keep, assuring the nation at the outset of the war that the military would finish the mission in Iraq quickly for less than $100 billion.
By any measure, the U.S. government has spent a fortune in Iraq, at least $437 billion so far.
$12 billion a month in Iraq.
Estimated interest on borrowed war funds is $800 billion. Plus there's $600 billion for replacing military equipment and restoring pre-war troop levels. And another $600 billion for providing long-term medical care and disability compensation for wounded veterans.
Government investigators say billions have been lost to fraud, mismanagement, or bad bookkeeping. And the spending won't end when the fighting does.
The problem with the war is we're getting nothing for it.
If there's any question as to what it's an allegory for, I will tell you. It is the powers that be in the United States of America. It's profiteers. War is for profit. It's not to save the world for democracy or for king and country. No, bullshit. It's for the profit of the top 10%.
The Cost Plus program in Iraq, where the United States government borrows money and then it pays it to contractors who are then incentivized to run up the cost because the contractors are going to get a percentage of the total amount wasted.
Cost Plus encourages you to run up the cost of a program because you are going to get a percentage of the end result.
These contracts are managed under a system called Cost Plus, which is the opposite of trying to save money. It guarantees that everything that you buy will be paid back and reimbursed if it's seen as justified, and you'll be given a profit in addition.
A Cost Plus arrangement that critics say leaves little incentive to save. The more taxpayer dollars Halliburton spends, the more Halliburton makes.
It was so lavish. Rows of vegetable platters, beef platters, fish platters.
It's a Cost Plus contract. KBR looked at it, the more money we spend, that's more money we get in our pockets. The soldiers are sleeping on these little cots out in the middle of the desert, while these KBR executives are driving these $40,000 vehicles.
They and their secretaries are driving at least a $30,000 to $40,000 vehicle.
Why do they need an H2 Hummer? Why do they have Cadillac Escalades in Iraq? for Halliburton managers? What is the purpose?
One invoice that I saw was for about $7,000 for 1 month for a SUV on a lease. It was a 3-year contract. Comes up to roughly $250,000. A vehicle that you and I could purchase at the local dealership for probably top of the line $45,000. And the taxpayer paid $250,000.
And you can see it when you look at the actual contracts that are awarded. You know, Dick Cheney's former company, Halliburton, received $18.5 billion. The subsidiary of Halliburton, which was KBR, or Keller, Brown and Root, they received a $7 billion contract for reconstruction and troop support. Parsons got $5.3 billion for engineering and construction. DynCorp International got $1.9 billion for police training. Transatlantic Traders got $5 million for surveillance aircraft. CACI got $1.62 billion in contracts. Titan got $2.05 billion in military service contracts. Blackwater received a whole host of contracts, one of which was $21 million just to guard Paul Bremer while he was there.
The contracting business in Iraq is very, very lucrative.
This war has been privatized to a greater extent than any other war in history.
They're part of a multi-billion-dollar industry fueled by your tax dollars.
40 cents out of every dollar Congress controls now goes to contractors.
There's more than 20,000 private military on the ground.
You have the second largest armed force in Iraq, or private security.
Monopoly and cartel behavior. It is corrupt, it is corrupting, it is corrosive to our national defense.
We can see with these contracts where you're incentivized to run up the cost because by running up the cost, you get a percentage of the total bill.
It was all a scam. Halliburton was charging $45 for a six-pack can of like Coke or Pepsi that they give us and the military free in the mess hall. The little mobile units that we had to put our clothes in like a net duffel bag, Halliburton charged the government $100 for every bag of clothes they washed.
Because they get $99 a bag for a bag of laundry that I could do at home for $3.
The legal way of stealing from the government or taxpayers' money.
They got the wrong equipment, ordered the wrong stuff, computers stealing boxes, new vehicles. They'd push them out in what they called burn pits. And they just set it on fire, claim it as a loss, get more money for the right equipment or the right stuff they needed.
Order somebody else's wrong equipment just because somebody pays you to do it, and you burn it and destroy it.
You got brand new trucks over there, and there's not even oil filters. So when the motor blows, what do? Buy a new truck and build the government.
$75,000 truck, they wouldn't even have a spare tire to fit it, and we had to blow it up. And they didn't care Halliburton did because the government's paying for it.
Every day that a vehicle broke down, we would have to destroy it. And these are maybe $80,000 vehicles, maybe $100,000. You know, they're expensive trucks, entire convoys where every flatbed truck was empty.
By running empty trucks on the convoys and billing the government for them.
And it seems there wasn't no purpose in it. When you went up empty and you come back empty. And your buddy's getting killed for no cause at all. Not even as much as a Band-Aid on the truck. That's how Halliburton was making their killing, making their money.
2, higher and then much higher taxes.
The higher taxes, of course, are levied to pay these extravagant wars.
In Iraq, it is your money that's being used.
And live exercises.
This matters going forward. We're in a live exercise here.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
3, an increasingly unbalanced budget, despite the higher taxes.
The national debt is engineered to go only one way, higher.
4, wild inflation of our currency.
By increasing the money supply.
Most people don't have a clue how currency is created. Economists and bankers make it sound so complex that people think they can't understand it. But I'm going to strip our monetary system down to its essence so that you can see the scam behind the curtain and just how it affects you. Treasury bonds are our national debt. These glorified IOUs are to be paid back by you and I and our descendants through future taxation. Therefore, when the government issues a bond, it steals prosperity out of the future so that it can spend it today. The Treasury issues IOUs, bonds. The banks then buy those IOUs with currency. The Federal Reserve then writes IOUs, checks, and hands them to the banks in exchange for the Treasury's IOUs, the bonds. And currency is created. So what's really happening is the Federal Reserve and the Treasury are just swapping IOUs, using the banks as middlemen, and abracadabra, presto, currency magically springs into existence. This process repeats and repeats over and over again, enriching the banks and indebting the public by raising the national debt. The end result is that there's a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and currency at the Treasury. This process is also where all paper currency comes from. And the politicians say, hey, thanks for that. And the government does some deficit spending on public works, social programs, and war. The government employees, contractors, and soldiers then deposit their pay in the banks. So once again, when currency is deposited in the banks get to lend it out, and then it gets redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent over and over again, creating bank credit all the way. This is where the vast majority of our currency supply comes from. In fact, 92 to 96% of all currency in existence is created not by the government, but here in the banking system. Now, massive amounts of currency spewing into society may at first sound like a fun idea. That is, until you remember one of the most important hidden secrets of money from episode 1, that the prices of everyday goods and services act as a sponge on an expanding currency supply. The more currency we have, the more prices rise. This is where inflation comes from. The true definition of inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Rising prices are merely the symptom. So our entire currency supply is nothing but a couple of bucks whipped up in this hocus-pocus scam where the Treasury and the Federal Reserve swap glorified IOUs, and a bunch of numbers that the banks just type into their computers. That's it. That's our entire currency supply. It's nothing but a supply of numbers. Some of them printed, most of them typed, and there is nothing else. If you borrow the very first dollar into existence, and that's the only dollar that exists on the planet, but you promise to pay it back plus another dollar's worth of interest, where do you get the second dollar to pay the interest? The answer is that you have to borrow that one into existence and promise to pay it back with interest as well. So now there are $2 in existence, but you owe $4, and so on and so on. The result is there's never enough currency to pay the debt. There is always more debt in the system than there is currency in existence to pay the debt. Therefore, the whole system is impossible. It is finite. It will come to an end one day. What would happen if the government stopped borrowing to do deficit spending? Are the payments on those treasury bonds going to stop? What would happen if the public stopped borrowing and going deeper into debt? Are your house and car payments going to stop? No. There is a payment due every month on the principal plus the interest on every dollar in existence, and those payments do not stop. If we stop borrowing, then no new currency is created to replace the currency that we used to make those payments. Whether you're making a payment on a loan or paying tax to make a payment on a bond, the portion of the payment that goes to pay off the principal extinguishes that portion of the debt. But the debt also extinguishes the currency. Currency and debt are like matter and antimatter. When they meet, they annihilate each other. If we just pay off the principal only on all the loans and bonds that exist, the entire currency supply just vanishes. So if we don't go deeper into debt every year, look what happens. The whole thing goes into a deflationary collapse under the weight of those payments. Politicians and pundits alike talk about balancing the budget, paying down the debt, and living within our means. They don't understand that that is deflationary. It is impossible to do under our current monetary system without collapsing the whole economy. This is why any talk of a debt ceiling is not only ridiculous, it's delusional. The system is designed to require ever-increasing levels of debt just to continue. And that's why politicians will always kick the can down the road and raise this so-called debt ceiling over and over again until the whole system finally collapses under its own weight. In other words, they don't want it to collapse on their watch. The Founding Fathers of the United States knew the dangers of central banking and fought to free themselves from this very thing. The Revolutionary War started out as a tax revolt, but now we must pay tax just to have a monetary system. Having just suffered through the hyperinflation of the continental dollar, which was printed into oblivion to finance the Revolutionary War, they understood the dangers of fiat currency and debt-based monetary systems. So to protect future generations from institutional theft and out-of-control government, they wrote into the Constitution that only gold and silver can be money for the simple fact that you can't print them.